What is going on, everyone? What an exciting NFL draft behind us, and that means it is time to get into grading every single draft, every single pick from the weekend. And before we get started, I want to address a comment that I get every year on these videos. It's always the same. It's, we haven't seen these guys play a snap in the NFL yet. How can you grade these picks? Or my favorite, if you're so good at this, why aren't you an NFL GM? Look, NFL GMs and NFL teams get this stuff wrong all the freaking time. So I'm here to tell you what my evaluations are, how I think these new players fit in with their new teams, and did your team do a good job in the NFL draft, maximizing value and becoming a better football team? I realize some of these takes will be wrong. The NFL draft is a really hard process. I'll screw up. Your team's GM will screw up. It's part of the deal here. But at the end of the day, my draft, my record on these draft grades speaks for itself. I'm very proud of all the time I put into these evaluations. And if you're watching this video, you're here to hear if I think your team had a good draft. I'm not here to tell everybody that your team killed the draft. Some of these teams will have bad drafts. I'm here to tell you who I think those teams may be and to celebrate the teams that I think had excellent drafts as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Please do hit that like button. Really does help me out, like more than you could possibly imagine. Helps push this video out to other viewers and draft enthusiasts just like you. But let's go ahead and get started in the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys kicking off our grades here. And they go with Tyler Smith in the first round. And I really had to talk myself into this pick quite a bit. So I ultimately had a second round grade on him. You'll see in the little brackets there what my grade was on the player, just to add a little bit of perspective. And I do think this was a reach, but Tyler Smith definitely has upside, and there is something I do like about this pick, and that is that if he's used as a guard on day one, I think he can actually kind of kick some butt and clear some paths up front in the run game. He's a really good run blocker. He put a lot of defenders on their ass at Tulsa. The problem is he's just a complete mess in pass protection from his head to his toes. Like with his hands, really poor usage, grabs a ton, needs to get better in that department. His footwork especially a complete mess. So got to clean up his technique if he's ever going to play tackle, but a very young dude, a freak athlete. I do think he plays guard early on for Dallas. That's almost like a little contingency here. I think Terrence Steele can be a band-aid at right tackle for them in 2022. You put Tyler Smith in there at left guard. That's probably going to be their best offensive line. And then give him a couple of years. I do see the upside with the right coaching for him to eventually take over as either your right tackle, or maybe you go from Tyron Smith to Tyler Smith. So it's not the worst pick in the world. It gets a C-, which is just a below average pick. So I am very stingy with these grades. I do really want to try and emphasize what were good picks, what were great picks, what were just kind of average to below average picks. And to me, this was a below average pick for the Dallas Cowboys. Then Sam Williams in the second round. I thought this was a failure of a pick, one of the worst in the draft. I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong. He's got a lot of upside. He could develop sooner rather than later, or just eventually he could develop. But for me, Sam Williams is an athlete, and that's it. He was used in a weird system at Ole Miss, so he doesn't have a ton of experience rushing as a true edge. But man, he's got to put together how to consistently convert speed to power. He has no counter moves. Was really underwhelmed watching his tape. Obviously, you like the 40 time, but that's about it. So really, I think an underwhelming haul for the Dallas Cowboys in the first couple of rounds. I could be wrong. I'll say that a lot of times in this video, but I'm telling you like it is. I did not like these picks for Dallas. They take Jalen Tolbert at the end of the third round. Totally fine with that value. He's a third round pick for me. And I think this is a good pick, a well above average pick, a B grade. I think he competes with James Washington, and in 2023 is definitely your number 3 receiver on the outside. he fits Dak Prescott's style of receiver. He definitely prefers these kind of go-get-it receivers on the outside. So definitely fits the type of receiver they look for and was a good pick in the 3rd round, right around the value I had him at. Then they take Jake Ferguson, one of the better fits in this draft. And, my dad got me this little cowbell for the draft, and it's perfect because I was saying I need a bell to ring when I have good takes. So I'm ringing the bell. I had a almost perfect comparison on Jake Ferguson to Dalton Schultz. I tweeted this about a month ago. I said, athletically speaking, I said it in my tight ends video, athletically speaking, this dude is Dalton Schultz. On the tape, he's Dalton Schultz. 4th round talent. Take him right where Dalton Schultz went. When the Cowboys took Dalton Schultz, I said Dalton Schultz is a great Jason Witten replacement. Got a little bit of hate for that in this very video years ago. You can check the tape on that. 4th round, they take Dalton Schultz, who probably would have been a B grade, except I just have a really good feeling about this pick. Watching his game, I thought Jason Witten immediately. Jake Ferguson is a great Dalton Schultz replacement. Schultz is playing on the franchise tag, so it's probably going to take a year to see this through, but I genuinely believe they drafted Dalton Schultz on a rookie contract, and that's got a lot of value. So given the dream scheme fit and just how he fits in that offense, his skill set, we've seen produce just a good tight end there. That's a good pick. That's not just a good pick, that's an excellent pick in the 4th round. Then we get into late day 3 here. They take a developmental tackle, Matt Waletzko, and he's got a lot of athletic upside. He has rare length, definitely the type of gamble you want to take late in the draft. Just a good athlete with length. Length really needs to improve his technique and everything, but definitely a good gamble to make. There are going to be a few players in this in a crazy deep class where even Dane Brugler's draft guide, which is the draft guide on the market right now that has information on the most players. He had like 1,400 players. Even he had some players in this class that he didn't have on his radar, and he goes very, very deep, like the deepest you could possibly imagine. It's a weird year with a lot of seniors, super seniors, just kind of created a rare amount of depth way down the board. So there's going to be some players that I didn't get to. So unfortunately can't provide like super high end analysis on those guys. It is what it is. I can't evaluate 800 players and make quality content here, but they take Deron Bland out of Fresno State. Seems to be a guy with some length and some speed. I think most would agree a little bit early, but I would just describe that as an average pick, a special team or a developmental corner. They need some depth. No problem there. Damone Clark out of LSU is a fun pick for them. They have linebackers, but they are a team that definitely feels like you can never have enough linebackers, and that's a debatable concept right there, but Damone Clark's a really good one. I actually, before the injury was discovered on him, and he's not going to be able to play in 2022, he has some pretty serious, I don't know the details on it. I want to say it was back related, but either way, he's going to have to have surgery and miss the season. So you never know if he's going to be able to get back to full speed after that. That's why he fell. But I actually had a slightly higher grade on Damone Clark before those injuries than I did on Quay Walker, who the Packers took in the 1st round. Both SEC linebackers with a lot of athleticism and size. So definitely someone that was about a 3rd round player for me pre-injury. But even with the injury, I thought 4th, 5th round was a good time to take a gamble on him. So he's going to get a B grade, and we'll see if he can come back healthy. They take John Ridgeway. He provides some beef up front there. Some of the D tackles had been going there, so I really don't have any issues with that pick, even if I had him as more of a later priority free agent grade guy. But this defensive tackle class was pretty weak. A lot of guys had been going off the board, so no issues there. They needed someone that could step in and kind of get in the way against the run, and that's what he'll do. He has no pass rush upside, but that's okay. It's basically a 6th round pick. And then Devin Harper out of Oklahoma State. Unfortunately, the Cowboys had 2 players that I didn't get to evaluate. I did 340 players. The Cowboys took 2 guys that were not on my radar. But a special teamer and another linebacker to maybe provide some depth until Damone Clark can come back next year. They definitely have a crowded linebacker room. And I don't think it's a crazy good pick or anything, but Ultimately, for the Cowboys, I do think they made some pretty major reaches early on that makes it difficult for me to like this draft a lot. I think Tyler Smith can get there and ultimately pay it back to you, but at the same time, this is a team trying to win right now. Would maybe a Devontae Wyatt to improve your interior defensive line, and then go with an offensive lineman in the second round instead of just drafting Sam Williams altogether? Would that have been a better draft strategy? Yeah, in my opinion, I would say absolutely. So I will be a little bit critical of this draft for the Cowboys. They've had some good drafts lately. I don't see them have gotten any true game-changing players out of this draft. I'll be surprised if Sam Williams becomes a starter at all as a second-round pick. I think Tolbert can be a contributor, and Jake Ferguson will take over as a starting tight end. That's kind of saving their draft a little bit late, but I'm going to go C- for the Dallas Cowboys. Then the New York Giants, a lot of picks to break down here. So, they nailed the top 2 picks, and I clipped my reactions. You can see a little bit more on these 2 guys, but to put it simply, their 2 biggest needs, in my opinion, were edge and offensive tackle. And they got to me the edge rusher that, for me, should have been the number 1 pick if the number 1 pick had to be an edge rusher. And then they get the number 1 overall player for me in this draft, both at their biggest positions of need and those 2 positions being impact positions, offensive tackle and edge. It really doesn't get any better than that for a first round. It's honestly an all-time haul for the Giants. You just won't see guys, to me, getting potential, all-pro players at those 2 positions. Excellent value and all of it. So that gets them off to a great start. But then I think their draft was very one day great, next day bad, last day pretty good. Reflected by the grades here. Wan'Dale Robinson out of Kentucky to the Giants was, in my opinion, a horrible pick. I don't understand this at all. Just for one, like the other receivers on the board, you could have gotten Sky Moore, a laundry list of more talented receivers, in my opinion. If you wanted this gadget, gimmick, undersized playmaker type, I think Calvin Austin's going to be better in that role. I think Khalil Shakir is comparable, who went in the 5th round. For me, Wan'Dale Robinson's an undersized playmaker, half running back, half slot receiver, not a lot of deep speed, not a vertical presence. I get that they're kind of panicking because they were making plans to have Kadarius Toney in there. It looks like that's not going to be the case. He'll technically be able to do a lot of that stuff, but I do not think they had to take him in the early second round. This is horrible value, and I don't even think he's that good of a player, so I am going to be critical of that pick. Then you get into the 3rd round. They take Josh Ezwedu. So I actually have him as a tackle on my board. He'll obviously be a guard for them. They don't need a tackle, but he played a little bit of both at UNC. So I think he can compete for a starting role. A lot of interior offensive linemen had started to come off the board, so you do have to factor that in here. So I have no problems with this pick. I think it was an above average pick for them, and I like Ezwedu, so we'll see how he pans out. Cordell Flott in the slot there for them. It was a little bit early. I also feel like, they have Aaron Robinson, they have some other corners. If they're so desperate for a press man corner, I don't think that's Cordell Flott. Someone you'll hear me bring up a lot in these draft grades is Zion McCollum. And I know I could be wrong about Zion McCollum, but man, I just can't understand why he fell so far, but I'm not going to be overly critical of everybody. It's just something to note. I think Cordell Flott can eventually win a starting slot role, but it's not even Robinson. They have as well Darnay Holmes, even Julian Love. It's a crowded secondary for what Cordell Flott does. So I think the value's fine. He's a good young player. Could eventually become a good player for them, but I didn't fully understand that pick personally. Then the Daniel Bellinger pick out of San Diego State, excellent value. Actually had this in one of my mock drafts where I compared him to Foster Moreau, also made some comparisons to Dawson Knox, 2 good tight ends in the NFL, 2 guys that were really good athletes that went underutilized in college. And of course, with Brian Dable coming down from Buffalo, did a good job with one of those players in Dawson Knox. And I think he sees a ton of similarities with Daniel Bellinger. So could take some time, just like Dawson Knox did. but they have a desperate need at tight end, and they might be forced to get it from him a little bit sooner rather than later. So he's a good player. I think all the flashes were there. He was just, again, very underutilized in college for a run-heavy offense at San Diego State. Then they grabbed Dane Belton. Really no issues with this pick at all. I think this was a good pick. Young, safety, 21 years old, good hands, physical guy that played a lot in the slot, but they probably see him as more of a safety that can go, in this system, play a lot of cover one man, where he did a lot of that at Iowa, but go too high a little bit more as well than he did at Iowa. So definitely a good pick. The safeties were really flying off the board here, so he was the best one available when they took him. No issues there. Micah McFadden out of Indiana, really good blitzer, a solid athlete, a guy that plays kind of with a chip on his shoulder, call it a dickhead mentality. They're going to like having him in there, especially at least as a special teamer, and someone that I think has potential to, at least in this linebacker room, compete for a starting job. So that's a good pick. I can really just jump to the Darian Beavers pick. It's worth noting that this regime, not just with Dable, but the new general manager, Joe Shane, going back to the ties in Carolina and, of course, with Buffalo, one of the main draft strategies for these Giants and this regime is double dip. If you've got a need and you got two guys close, throw a couple darts and hope one of them hits. So I think you're seeing similar course of action here with Darian Beavers being followed up again in the second round. Both these guys for me were 5th, 7th round guys, full-size linebackers that can play in a lot of different positions for them. So both of those picks were good value where they were. They take DJ Davidson. Even though this was a little bit early based on my grade, this defensive tackle class was just weird. It was super thin, and you kind of had to take if you wanted a guy that could actually, get in the way, we had the same thing with Ridgeway for Dallas. If you want a guy that can actually play a little bit, you kind of had to take him a little bit earlier. It was just a really bad defensive tackle class. That's something I've talked about. So I don't really have any issues with them taking him in the 5th round. They didn't have a lot of options. They felt like they needed some depth, and I agree. So I think that pick was actually a pretty good process, even if the player is blah. He's a run defender with no upside, but those have become a little bit harder to find these days. And then Marcus McKeithen out of UNC, big, thumping, full-sized guard with one of the better anchors in this class, and not a bad player. I wouldn't be stunned if he eventually competes for starting jobs, but he's gonna need some time before we're into that conversation. So a little bit of up and down, honestly, with these guys, but this is one of the all-time great first rounders. So you kind of start as an A coming out of that first round, if not an A+. The Wan'Dale Robinson pick takes a little bit of steam off of that. I think just day 2 in general was pretty lackluster for them, but they made up a little bit of ground on day 3 as well. So I give this draft an A-, an almost full-on A. Excellent grade for the Giants. Okay, then the Philadelphia Eagles, a bit of a smaller class here, but a really good one. I don't think they made any mistakes, and they made some really good decisions as well. So they go and trade up for Jordan Davis. That entire move is an A, in my opinion. You look at that defensive line, right now they're fine, right? They have Fletcher Cox, Javon Hargrave, but I've just been, in general, very impressed with the entire game plan for the Eagles offseason. They went and get a future first-round pick next season in a better quarterback class. They've sort of done everything they can to make sure Jalen Hurts isn't their guy. I think they know he isn't based on the way they've gone about this process, but I think that getting in on next year's quarterback class is smart. So very much a future-oriented team, and this draft is a draft for the future. It's not a draft to try and win a Super Bowl this year with Jalen Hurts, which would be moronic. And I know a lot of Eagles fans probably think they could do it, but you're wrong. You're not winning a Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts in all likelihood, and they know that. So they're gearing up for the future Philadelphia Eagles here. They get Jordan Davis, who's going to learn a little bit more how to rush the passer behind Hargrave and Fletcher Cox, who you're now going to pair with Milton Williams, a third-round pick last year, who's more of a 3 technique, who needs a big, massive 340-pound defensive tackle to eat up blocks to free up some space for him to operate. You're going to have one of the most, if not the most, athletic interior defensive lineman duos in the history of the NFL, and that's not hyperbolic. We know Jordan Davis is pound for pound one of the best athletes to ever enter the NFL just based off of combine workouts alone. Milton Williams, same thing last year, so plenty of time for those guys to develop. Hargrave also in the last year of his contract, so Fletcher Cox, Hargrave will be phased out. Davis and Milton Williams will be phased in. Excellent process. The A.J. Brown trade speaks for itself. So I do include any draft day trades for players. I think that is an important part of the draft process on draft night, and that's what we're trying to evaluate is how they did during the draft. So they go get A.J. Brown. I don't need to tell you that that's a great move. Go look at the reaction that Mike Vrabel had when he found out. He's pissed. He's a great player, just the kind of guy who's young, productive, premium position. I don't understand why the Titans felt they had to trade him. I understand the receiver market's pretty big, but $25 million a year for A.J. Brown makes even more sense for the Eagles, who are going to have a quarterback on a rookie contract. Absolute slam dunk. I actually give this an A+ because I want to emphasize that this is genuinely one of the best moves of the entire draft. I want to save those A+ grades for the truly special moves. This was one of them. And then you get to the second round. Cam Jurgens makes so much sense here. Again, planning for the future. He's not going to start now, and that's good. He's not ready to start now. That's why I had a third round grade on him. But he has one of the highest potential grades out of any offensive lineman in this entire class. Heck, let's compare it to what I had on Tyler Smith. I had an 85 potential grade on Tyler Smith, 84 on Cam Jurgens. Shows you a little bit of that value preposition when we criticize the Cowboys pick. But Jurgens gets to learn behind Kelce, who's a physical clone of Cam Jurgens, or put it the other way around. One of the more athletic offensive line prospects you'll see, a guy that can literally move like a linebacker and tested like a linebacker. So a really special athlete. And I know they drafted Landon Dickerson last year. Fine. Offensive line is so valuable. Just keep Dickerson at guard. He's played well there. You have Kelce back, and now Jurgens can be your developmental center, and just keep Dickerson at guard. So I really like that pick. Almost gave it an A-, but we're sticking with a B+. And then Nakobe Dean in the third round. Many will deem this as an all-time steal type of deal, or at least one of the better steals of the draft. Even before the injury stuff, I had a second to a third round grade on Nakobe Dean. I really thought he was probably the most overrated player in this entire draft. I thought first round conversation on him was ridiculous. He had all these just wide open rush lanes because of Jordan Davis. I mean, that's about as lucky as it gets to get to play your college career behind Jordan Davis. Now you get to go to the NFL and do the same, where you're going to have wide open rush lanes because he cannot take on blocks in the run game. If a linebacker gets if a lineman gets their hands on him, it's over. So he's got to be a weak side linebacker. He has to be sort of that run and chase, open field production type of linebacker. They have a player on their roster right now who's going to do that in Keyz White. Was a good signing. That's the type of reason I don't think Nakobe Dean was this ultra value. I think there's guys like White. There's Jayon Brown who signed for cheap. That's who Nakobe Dean is to me. He's a really good weak side linebacker. This was a good pick. I give it a B+. To get him at the back end of the third round, I think is great value. Sounds like he's going to have surgery and might not be able to play this year. But heck, like I just said, I don't think he would have started anyway. So he is going to give them a good weak side linebacker. And he has a very high floor. We feel very good about what Nakobe Dean is, and it is a starting caliber player. He's just probably not someone you want to be your only linebacker, because you also want a linebacker that can get involved in the run game. And that's why his value is a little bit lower. But when healthy, he's a starting caliber weak side linebacker that gives you a really high floor at the end of the third round. So it's still a very good pick. Many people will probably give this an A, an A+. I'm just going to be honest. I think Nakobe Dean was an overrated prospect. Not that he's a bad player. I wouldn't have even thought about him in the first round. And second round, even then, was kind of like, okay, there's other linebackers with more upside that are faster. that can do the weak side linebacker thing just as well. Then you have to go all the way into the 6th round. They also gave up, I think, a 4th round pick for A.J. Brown, so I guess factor that in, but just part of the A+. They get Kyron Johnson out of Kansas. Interesting player. He's 6'1", 230 pounds, played edge at Kansas, and ran a 4.4 40. When I did his eval, I was like, what is this player? Just weird. Probably going to have to switch to linebacker at the next level. But, I mean, you're talking about an elite kick cover guy because he can hit, he can tackle, and he can run with 4.4 speed. And if you can find a role for him as a blitz linebacker, or maybe he develops some coverage or anything, then that's great. He obviously has some physical talent. But if nothing else, you're getting a potentially elite special teamer there in the 6th round. Oftentimes, that's an above average pick. And then they get Grant Calcaterra out of SMU, a player a lot of people are familiar with. He was a star at Oklahoma, had concussion issues, and had to step away from the game. Came back at SMU a year later and kind of resumed his career. Really productive tight end, great route runner, really athletic guy. Not much of a blocker. He tries, but there's some Zach Ertz flashes in there. I doubt he'll ever be Zach Ertz, but I actually really like this pick because you got Dallas Goedert. He's your tight end 1. No one's questioning that. He's going nowhere. But this is a team that wants to run the ball. They want to get big. They want to come out in 12 personnel on early downs if they can. And you can bring Grant Calcaterra out there. Honestly, I think day 1 as your F tight end. And you can flex him out wide. You can play him on the wing. And he'll contribute as a blocker. I think he'll give you an effort there. He's a high energy player, but he is on the slender side. A lot of times he looks like a receiver when he's out there. But more importantly, he can be a mismatch problem. He can get open early for Jalen Hurts. To me, he's a guy that is, as long as the concussion stuff doesn't catch back up with him, I think he can play in the league for 5 or 6 years, if not more. And a guy that you'll always look back on him in the stat sheet and be like, oh, Grant Calcaterra got 20 catches, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns again last year. Just solid, number 2 tight end. And I like the way he fits in their offense as well. Then we have our last draft in the NFC East, the Washington Commanders. So an interesting draft for them. Of course, they go and get Carson Wentz. Carson Strong, by the way, went to the Eagles. Love that move. But we're not going to do UDFAs in this. There's enough players to talk about as is. But the Washington Commanders trade down and then take Jahan Dotson. So I think this is a good pick. Again, B- is an above average pick. This isn't school where you're like disappointed with a B. Like, you should be happy getting a B here. I'm trying to emphasize the truly elite picks with A grades. But, I did think need was an overstated. I did think wide receiver was an overstated need for Washington. I would not have been so ready to give up on Dyami Brown, who to me was a top 50 player in last year's class who just got horrid quarterback play, especially looking back on it when they get Sam Howell, his college quarterback, in the 5th round. To me, that was just a little bit antsy. I would have trusted what you saw in Dyami Brown a little bit more and said, okay, he's got much better quarterback play. He's a young player in year 2. I think he's a valuable player that's now going to be riding the pine as long as Curtis Samuel's healthy. So I would criticize that a little bit. I think if you could have gone Daxton Hill or Trent McDuffie to fill out that secondary, would have been a much better pick for them. But it's still, again, a very good pick. Jahan Dotson, to me, was one of the 19 players in this draft with a true first-round grade. I think he's better than Drake London, who went 8th overall. He's a really good player, and he's going to be productive for them. You'll look back on it. You won't complain about having Jahan Dotson. So, again, a good pick, but not some elite pick either. I will be critical of the Fedarian Mathis pick here. I thought he was a, end of day 3, early day 4 guy. He's an early down run defender. Just doesn't provide a whole lot of pass rush. Never did in 5 years at Alabama. He's fine. You didn't need a starter on the D-line. I think for them, if you want your Tim Settle replacement, you could have gone Neil Farrell in the 3rd, 4th round. I think you could have waited and been just as fine. So to, again, not take a Zion McCollum or not take a safety or someone that I think could give you a better impact for this team, I think was a mistake that I'll be critical of. I think that was a poor draft pick. He'll be fine. He'll be a third defensive tackle. He'll do exactly what they drafted him to do, but I think they overpaid for that role. Then Brian Robinson out of Alabama. I do think there's an element of this team that's missing a power run game. Antonio Gibson is explosive. He's exciting. But a lot of times you can tell that this is a guy that's just inexperienced at running back, and you get some senses of why they don't fully trust him, whether it's in the receiving game or with his vision. I think Brian Robinson's going to be a good player here for them, but in a wicked deep running back class, again, you're passing up on defensive backs that maybe could have made a bigger impact for you. I think it's too early to take a running back. It is what it is. It's an average pick. He's a solid player. They take Percy Butler in the 4th round. Interesting player. He's got real 4.3 speed. He's going to be an interesting fit in their system. He can really pick up crossing routes from cover 4 really well. I think he has some range to play free safety as well. Gives them some athleticism that they're kind of lacking back there. He'll compete. Now I say that, and he's going to compete with the safety out of Cincinnati, who I liked as well last year, who's also a really athletic guy. But I think those two guys will compete for starting work this year. So that's a good pick, early 4th round. Good value at a 4th, 5th on him. Then Sam Howell in the 5th round. Are you kidding me? What is the NFL doing? I understand, even up and through the 3rd round, I understand there's an opportunity cost. You're potentially passing on starters. If he's good, you can't take a quarterback next year, all this stuff. I don't care. The second we got to the 4th round, when we got to day 3, he should have been off the board like that. He is not a day 3 player. Come on. He has issues with his tape, 100%. He is by far... he is far from, I should say, a sure thing. But the upside is worth it. The gap, I've always said the gap between him and Malik Willis and Sam Howell is teeny tiny. The NFL mostly agreed, but for some reason Sam Howell was the odd man out who slipped a little bit further. And there's a lot of reasons why that could be, but Washington capitalizes here. Someone to honestly compete with Carson Wentz immediately. And if Carson Wentz doesn't like that, that's fine. He can go. Carson Wentz should embrace the competition, and he's talented enough that he should be able to beat Sam Howell out with no complaints about it. It's a 5th round pick. If you can't beat a 5th rounder out, Carson Wentz, you don't belong here. So excellent pick. To me, that was one of the premium values of the entire draft. So good work there. And then the rest of these picks are just kind of fine. They take Cole Turner, big bodied, go get it, jump ball tight end. There wasn't a whole lot of great tight ends on the board, so that was fine. Just a little bit early for me. I don't think he's going to be much other than a red zone jump ball threat. Kind of got hot, went on a mid-season stretch where he was just balling out, winning a ton of contested catches. That usually doesn't translate to the next level so much. The rest of his game's pretty incomplete as a tight end. But I will say they've done a good job developing players at that position, so I'll give him a chance. But I do like the dart throw on Chris Paul in the 7th round. Really athletic guy, just tested out the gym. Tape sucks, but yeah, this is a team that's actually developed offensive linemen pretty well, so no problems with that pick. And then Christian Holmes, unfortunately, another player that I was not able to evaluate. Someone that can play special teams and compete in a cornerback room that I do think went a little bit neglected here in Washington. That would be definitely criticism for me. When you look at the first 3 rounds, I think one of those picks should have been a better defensive back, whether it was in the slot or as a corner. I get that they kind of like their guys, but they're older, and I think they do need second safety, and I think they need slot corner help. So a little bit underwhelmed that they didn't come away there to improve their defense, and a secondary that was really underwhelming last year. Ultimately, they got some good value here. Jahan Dotson's a good pick. Percy Butler's a good pick. Sam Howell's a great pick. Some reaches in there. I gave them a B- for, a good draft for Washington. So that is the NFC East. I'm going to be collecting the final grades. I'm going to be ranking 1 through 32 for all of these draft classes as we go. Thank you so much for watching. Please do hit that like button. Probably going to call it a night. We streamed for 7 hours today and I got this done. Probably going to call it a night and then pick up tomorrow. And I'm just going to be cranking these out as soon as possible. We are going to do the NFC North next, and then the AFC East. Those are our next 2 on the pecking order. And again, thank you for watching. Please do hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss any more of these draft grades videos, and we'll see you then. Peace out.